I was cheated on by my wife who chose a celebrity fantasy over our marriage, until I exposed it all. Frank Walker watched fellow patrons savoring their time, some pausing for walks or to place calls. Beverages and coffee were served, and the festivity persisted, but Frank was preoccupied, considering an unexpected message left by an unknown server. This message warned him of a potential threat posed by Mark Laval, who, according to the note, intended to seduce his spouse. The alarm caught Frank off guard, and when he examined the note again, he noticed his spouse dancing with Laval once more. This troubled him, especially when they disappeared for the second time. Frank decided to step in, however. Before he could rise, the music stopped, and he saw them leave the dance floor. He returned to his seat, reassured, expecting Laval to accompany his wife back. Instead, they approached Mark's table, where Frank observed them conversing with him and his acquaintances. Shortly after Laval left, his wife went to the restroom after saying goodbye to Frank and proclaiming her love for him. Frank watched her walk past the dining area toward the corridor leading to the restrooms. He suspected something was wrong with her explanation about going to the restroom. The peculiarity was her stop and confession of love, which suggested she was leaving for reasons other than to use the restroom. Frank stood up and followed her, but he had only walked a few steps when Laval and his associates rose from their table, as the message had warned, and blocked his path. Frank Walker made his living by addressing difficulties for diverse groups. On a weekly basis, he would fly to different countries to help businesses and organizations that had experienced problems with their administration, operations, or finances. Frank frequently dealt with egotistical and dominant high-ranking officials who thrived on scheming, bribes, lies, manipulation, and pressure. Every day he met recalcitrant supervisors and executives who exploited and bullied employees while gloating about their brutality. When Frank interfered in these circumstances to enact changes that affected people's jobs and well-being, he often encountered opposition, bullying, and even threats. He once received threats from a narcotics syndicate for his role in transferring a U.S. manufacturing enterprise from Mexico to Alabama. Nonetheless, Frank remained undeterred, and the relocation continued. Frank excelled in his profession and thrived when confronted with greedy, ambitious, ruthless, and perilous characters. It was essentially his forte. Thus, when Mark Laval, an imposing but inexperienced figure, and his friends attacked him, Frank quickly reversed the dynamics, intimidating them. They had never been so openly warned of the consequences of their behavior until Frank did, and they swiftly made way for him. With Laval and his associates no longer hindering him, Frank hurried after Brooke. When he caught up, she was approaching the establishment's rear exit. "Brooke!" he called out. She either didn't hear him or chose to ignore him, but she continued walking toward the exit. Frank accelerated his pace, closing the distance, and cried out again, "Brooke, where are you going?" This time, Brooke halted, turned to face her husband with an annoyed and inquisitive expression, doubting Frank's presence. Frank noticed her strangely distant conduct and was clearly annoyed that he had followed her. "I'll inquire about the same matter. What are you doing here?" he questioned. Brooke thought for a few moments before responding, But she stopped mid-sentence. Frank looked into her eyes and inquired again, "Where are you going, Brooke?" She shifted her gaze away, thinking to herself that this situation shouldn't have occurred. He shouldn't be present. Brooke resumed speaking but soon stopped. She needed to think carefully about what she was going to tell him. Realizing that inventing a story was pointless, she felt obligated to confess the truth. She needed to notify him of her destination, although it would be painful and cause her great distress. Brooke had run into Mark Laval earlier that evening. After leaving the restroom, she passed Mark's table. He noticed her, rose from his seat, politely halted her progress, introduced himself, and began a brief chat. Brooke then returned to her table to join Frank and the others at their gathering. As the celebration reached its peak, the musical band made their entry and began their first performance of the evening. Shortly after the band began to play, Mark Laval approached the guest table. Naturally, everyone was overjoyed that a local soccer player and sports icon had appeared. He was friendly, introduced himself, shook hands with everyone, took some selfies, signed autographs, and then encouraged Brooke to dance. Brooke was surprised and declined his offer, but Mark insisted respectfully. The other participants encouraged her, and Frank made no objections, so she reluctantly accepted. Needless to say, Brooke was concerned as Mark led her from their group to the dance floor. However, once there, Brooke discovered that dancing with Mark was beyond anything she had ever imagined. He was young, beautiful, bold, a talented athlete, and a great dancer. During their dance, Mark's touch connected with her in a way she appreciated. He held her in the way she preferred and conversed in a way she enjoyed. He expressed sentiments she appreciated hearing, captivating her. From that moment forward, she consistently accepted his invitations to the dance floor. Her desire for him grew stronger as the night progressed, becoming undeniably physical. Eventually, at the end of the night, he led them away from the dance floor to a private location where he embraced, kissed, caressed, and expressed his affections for her. He suggested they travel to his house for seclusion and relaxation so they could freely explore each other. He clearly described how they would spend the night together, increasing their physical connection, and promised an incredible experience she would never forget. Brooke was intrigued. As she sat with Frank and the other guests, she considered Mark's proposition. She was torn about leaving Frank at the party to accompany someone she barely knew to his home. However, the prospect of being with Mark excited her. She understood her feelings for him went against her commitment to Frank. Despite having previously found other men interesting, it never progressed beyond simple attraction. This night was different. She craved Mark's adoration and wished to surrender to the moment. Nonetheless, she wrestled with the guilt of betraying Frank's trust and the promises they made. To justify her action, Brooke sought a convincing rationale, one she could accept morally, and hoped Frank would understand. She chose to depart with Mark because he was more than just a professional athlete and a local celebrity. He also exuded charm and a sense of honor that captivated her. Mark embodied the ideal of a love dream, and he presented Brooke with an appealing opportunity. She thought Frank would see it as a unique trip for her, and would back her decision to pursue this relationship with Mark just this once. She expected him to be disappointed but understanding because he wasn't just her husband, he was her most trusted friend and collaborator, wishing for her to take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with Mark. Brooke sought solace in these thoughts, providing herself with justification she could accept and hoped would persuade Frank. At her core, she knew her decision to accompany Mark was motivated by his bold claim that she was his for the evening, which triggered an intuitive need she couldn't deny. She was resolved not to miss out on such an exciting adventure, reminding herself that, in addition to being Frank's partner, she was a woman with her own needs and desires. As the birthday dinner ended and the group returned to the venue for more celebrations, Mark approached their table and invited Brooke to dance again. Frank, evidently unhappy, rebuffed Mark's repeated request for his wife's presence. Brooke expertly managed her husband's objections, consenting to one final dance with Mark while emphasizing her appreciation of the song. Mark thanked Frank for his patience before bringing Brooke to the dance floor. "There are some shadowy nooks there." "Are you ready to leave?" Mark inquired. She confirmed with a giggle, revealing her complete surrender to him. As the dance concluded, Mark escorted her back to their table to discuss their departure. He assured her of her safety and promised to resolve any worries Frank might have. Brooke positioned herself at the back exit, trusting his guarantee and preparing to leave with him. However, their plot was foiled when Frank unexpectedly appeared at the back door, revealing a hole in Mark's scheme. He interrupted her departure to demand an explanation. "Brooke, I'm waiting." "Tell me where you're heading," Frank said. Brooke summoned all her bravery and responded, "Frank, I'm going with Mark." "Are you going with Mark?" Frank inquired, emotionless. "Yes, I'm joining Mark. He welcomed me to his home," she stated. Frank stayed composed, wondering why she was going to his house and circumventing the door. He positioned himself between Brooke and the exit. "Frankly, this is too hard to describe at this time. I'll call you later to explain what I'm doing, but now I must leave." "Mark is waiting," she explained. Frank maintained his cool manner, refusing to let her pass and dismissing the possibility of a later explanation, insisting on understanding her intentions right then. "God, Frank, please, let's not make a fuss over this," Brooke implored. "Just let me go, and I'll clarify everything later." "No, Brooke, I need you to explain what's occurring right now," Frank stated, raising his voice. When Frank insisted, Brooke became defensive, retorting, "Frank, you're not commanding me. Step aside and let me go." "No, Brooke, you're my wife, and you won't leave until you've explained your actions," Frank retorted. Seeing Frank's tenacity, Brooke realized she needed to convey her intentions. With a hesitant sigh, she said, "Frank, I know how awful this sounds, and I honestly can't believe I'm doing it, but I'm going to Mark's to spend the night." She quickly added, "But Frank, this is only for tonight, and he'll bring me back tomorrow." Frank didn't immediately respond to Brooke's statements. It took him a few moments to process that his wife had just told him she was going to spend the night with Laval. However, he collected his thoughts and fiercely responded, "No, Brooke, you won't spend the night with Laval. You're not attending the overnight." "Are you planning to be intimate with him?" Frank interrupted. Brooke avoided his eyes, remaining silent. "Tell the truth, Brooke. Is this your plan?" Frank persisted, but Brooke remained mute, her gaze fixed on the ground. "Brooke, I know I'm correct," he said. Eventually, Brooke admitted, "Yes, Frank, you're correct. I intend to be intimate with Mark." There was silence in the hall. Brooke finally looked up and spotted her husband's bewildered expression. "Frank, what are you thinking about?" she asked. Frank Walker wasn't someone who was easily astonished or shocked, but what his wife had just revealed severely worried him. Even after reading the message warning him that this could happen, he briefly lost his composure. "What am I thinking?" "I'll tell you what I'm thinking, Brooke. This amazes me completely. It's simply absurd. That's what I'm thinking," he said. Frank's unusual outburst caught Brooke off guard. She had never seen him so angry during their time together, and it scared her. "God, Frank, I apologize." "I apologize," Brooke stated, still unable to meet his stare. "Why, Brooke? Why are you doing this?" Frank demanded. "Frank, I realize this may seem mad to you, but please listen," she begged. "I'm listening," he replied. "Frank, I believe every woman fantasizes about having a romantic experience with a celebrity or someone affluent and renowned," she began. Frank cut her off sarcastically. "Let me guess. Mark Laval is your fairy tale prince or knight in shining armor?" "Please, Frank, don't mock this. This is every woman's fantasy. Mark isn't just anyone. He's outstanding. A great gentleman, a star, and a celebrity. I want to live the dream that every woman hopes for. So, please, Frank, allowing me to have this experience demonstrates how much you care for me," she pleaded. Frank attempted to control his emotions in this unexpected scenario. "So, you'll go to Laval's tonight, be intimate with him, and he'll take you home tomorrow. Then we'll continue our happy marriage, as if the encounter never occurred." "Is this what you're saying, Brooke?" Frank questioned. "It's not an affair. It's only one night. Yes, tomorrow I'll return, and my fantasy will have come true. I'll be happy, and you'll be delighted because you backed me in this, and we'll move forward," she replied, hoping Frank would believe her. But after seeing his reaction, Brooke understood things weren't going as planned. "So, you're ignoring me to be personal with your charming prince, whom you believe is vastly superior to me?" he stated. "Damn, Brooke, it hurts. Are you indicating that I'm not special? Is he a real man?" No, I didn't say or imply that," she exclaimed in distress. "So, Brooke, what did you mean?" he inquired. "Frank, you're unique. You're a real man," she began, but Frank cut her off. "But I'm not a professional athlete or a celebrity who claims to know how to sexually satisfy a woman. Is this it?" Brooke looked down. "There's more to it," she explained. "So, what's the issue? Are you bored with me?" No, Frank, you're the finest," she said, but Frank interrupted again. "I'm the best, but you still need someone else," he stated. "Yes," she admitted, her gaze still averted. "So, tonight, you admit that the guy you want is Mark Laval," he said as she confessed, avoiding his gaze. "So, you've decided to spend the night with Mark Laval, engaging in a night of sensuality. It's not about love. I have no feelings of affection for him, but sure, I've decided to share an intimate moment with him and do something that many women dream of," she stated firmly and confidently. However, she promptly followed up. "Frankly, I'm not leaving our relationship. You're my spouse, and I'll never leave what we have. But tonight, I won't be by your side. I'll be with Mark. I encourage you to try to understand my needs and requirements." "Thank you, Frank. I beseech you, let's not make this a dramatic ordeal." Frank breathed deeply. "Why, Brooke? Why do you think I should be all right with you sleeping with another guy and then returning to me as if nothing happened?" he asked. "It's because you've always approached me with an open heart and treated my emotions, desires, and needs with care and attention. I trust that once you see how important this night with Mark is to me, you'll manage your frustration and approach it as a calm, seasoned, sophisticated individual," she told her husband. "Can I deal with this? Can I really cope? Please explain to me how I'm meant to deal with the idea that you'll be in Mark Laval's bed tonight, and he'll take you. How will I react tomorrow when he drives up with you, and I find that you two spent the entire night together? How can I look at you after you've shared yourself with someone else? Explain to me how I should handle all of this," he inquired. "Frank, I don't have an answer for you. I just hope you can work this out in your head so we can move on with our lives. I understand you're furious with me, but can't you see how important this experience is for me?" she questioned. "Brooke, you're implying that I should swallow my pride and tolerate your relationship with Laval," Frank noted. "This is not a fling," she cried. "No, Frank, I don't expect you to just accept it. I'm asking you to realize and reconcile with my feelings and desires since you love me and are my closest partner, my kindred soul. You want me to have this one-of-a-kind experience, an experience I may never have again. Frank, this is my plea to you, sweetie," she said. Frank moved by Brooke's appeal for a moment. He couldn't comprehend how she expected him to tolerate her intimacy with Laval. The longer he thought about it, the more evident it became that she didn't realize how serious her actions were and how they affected him and their relationship. She appeared immersed in a fantasy brought on by her connection with Laval that evening. He felt compelled to bring her back to reality. "Brooke, what do you call a guy whose wife has a relationship with another man?" he probed. Brooke thought for a while. Older people have difficulty understanding the word. "Exactly, Brooke. They call him a cuckold, which is a man whose wife has an affair with another man for sexual satisfaction. But I won't be made a cuckold by you and Mark Laval, he asserted firmly. As Brooke looked at Frank, tears welled up in her eyes. So, you won't stop me? She asked. No, Brooke, I won't intervene. You're grown and capable of making your own decisions. It's entirely up to you to decide whether or not to proceed. If you believe this is what you require, please proceed. Stay the night with him. Indulge in what you term love and intimacy, Frank said. I've previously clarified this isn't about love. I don't love him. I love you, Frank. It's simply a physical law, Brooke maintained, emphasizing she was drawn to Mark physically rather than emotionally. So you're distinguishing between love and physicality in your mind, Frank deduced. Yes, Frank, I admit to spending time with Mark because of our physical attraction, but I'll return to you because of our love. You're my spouse, my closest ally, and my soulmate. What we share is more than just a physical connection, she informed him. I won't dispute with you about the difference between love and physical attraction, but as I've already indicated, I won't hinder your path, Frank repeated. Brooke glanced at Frank, wondering if he truly understood her. If this is truly your wish, go for it, he said, but halted. Before you leave, we're ending our marriage right now. Brooke went into a panic. What about our marriage? What do you mean? I'm implying that once you leave, our matrimonial link will dissolve. We'll disconnect our rings and call our union off. The formal procedures will be addressed later, however. In my opinion, our marriage ends prior to your departure, Frank explained. Before Brooke had an opportunity to respond, Frank continued, and this evening, when Laval escorts you, I'll stand cuckolded because you're no longer my spouse. No, Frank, I can't do this. I just can't, Brooke yelled. We've agreed on this, Brooke. So what's your verdict? He pressed. I'm unsure, she said tightly. Ridiculous. You're completely aware of your desires. You intend to spend the evening with Mark Laval and then return to me, Frank claimed. Brooke wept bitterly. Are you serious? Will our marriage end if I spend only one night with Mark? She asked, her voice quivering. Absolutely, he confirmed with all earnestness. Brooke's tone quickly changed from terror to rage as she realized her explanation for spending the night with Mark had crumbled right in front of her. Frank, do my sentiments and feelings have such little value to you that you'd end our marriage over this without giving us the opportunity to resolve and move forward together? She questioned. Brooke, there's nothing to fix here. The realization that certain aspects of life, such as my spouse's infidelity with another man, can't be changed. I won't agree to an arrangement in which you're intimate with Laval, and then we go about our lives as if it were inconsequential, he stated. So, my sentiments, emotions, and desires are meaningless to you? She said sarcastically. Brooke, you vanished just moments ago, effectively rejecting me without explanation. If I hadn't chased and stopped you, you'd be on your way to Mark Laval's home for a romantic night. As a result, it's clear that my sentiments and emotions are irrelevant to you. Why should I care about your feelings and emotions? He questioned, highlighting the significance of her decision. My gosh, Frank, I'm deeply sorry, she stated. It never crossed my mind. Damn it, Brooke, don't say you didn't consider it. You did, Frank started. All I could think about was you preparing for Laval and the sensuous activities he had planned for you. You clearly didn't consider my point of view, the reasons you departed, your destination, or the activities he described. God, Frank, please believe me. I didn't intend to leave without telling you of my whereabouts. When I arrived at Mark's, I meant to message you about my whereabouts and actions, she explained. Message me, really? Frank laughed. So you were in bed with Laval with the aim of messaging me, right? Frank, I hate leaving the party, but I chose to go see Mark Laval for some private moments. I won't be returning home tonight. Good night and see you tomorrow. Is this it? Frank ridiculed. This is callous, Brooke, he observed. You're a touch cold. It's callous and shocking that you made the snap decision to quit me, your husband, your closest companion, and your soulmate, to spend the night with a man you met recently, Frank delivered. Brooke sobbed. What's truly callous is your expectation that I'll tolerate it as if it were inconsequential. That's callous, she complained. I'm so sorry, Frank, I just didn't believe, she stated. Brooke, it makes no difference whether you pondered or not, and if you communicated or not, because I stopped you before you could leave. Now I understand your motives, while you understand mine. We no longer have to speculate. Now we must face reality, Frank spoke with resolve. Brooke looked at Frank with a puzzled glance. And what's the crux? She inquired. The essence is this. There's an exit, and something much more beautiful awaits you outside. I assume he's becoming impatient. The choice is yours, Frank informed his 12-year-old wife firmly and definitely. Brooke announced without hesitation. Frank, I won't walk through that door. I refuse to leave you for him. I won't sacrifice our common life for his gain. I'm not that naive, she explained. Frank had been watching her closely for about a quarter of an hour. You appeared ready to leave through that door and accompany him. So, what's the difference now? Is everything essentially the same, aside from the fact that you're afraid to get a divorce? Frank inquired. Is it possible to think that your urgent desire to be intimate with Laval has simply vanished? Or are you going to wait until next week when I'll be in Europe to see him? He questioned. No, why would you assume this? Brooke exclaimed, raising her voice. Are you going to be disloyal to me when I'm not around? He pressed. No, never have I been unfaithful to you. I'd never betray you. I adore you, she said loudly. But earlier tonight, you were on the point of infidelity. If I hadn't intervened, you'd be betraying me right now for the second time, Frank recounted. The revelation hit Brooke hard, and she was forced to confront the reality of her conduct toward Mark. Oh my goodness, no, what was going on in my mind? She yelled. So, what happened? He inquired. I'm not certain, Frank. I'm utterly confused. I can't believe I thought it was acceptable to go with Mark, that it wouldn't be inappropriate or bother you, she admitted. Frank listened, his uncertain expression not escaping her. She realized she had to be completely truthful with him. Frankly, I'm not sure what got into me. It all started when Mark approached our table and asked me to dance, then led me to the dance floor. He was so confident and pushy, continually expressing his desire for me and how lovely it would be to be with me. Then he hugged me tight, kissed me, and began the rest. And Frank, I didn't resist. I didn't push him away, she admitted, tears streaming down her face. So, you encouraged him, Frank pointed out. Yes, I encouraged him. I'm very sorry, Frank, she wept. Then I convinced myself that leaving with him was the right decision and that you'd understand and not mind if I left with him. All I can say is that I know I made a tremendous mistake, and I'm deeply sorry, she wept. Frank heard her, pondering the note the waitress had handed him. He dug into his pocket and brought it out. Here, read this, he suggested. Brooke read the note and then looked at Frank. Where did this come from? She inquired. The server gave it to me during our supper, he responded. Is this just a tough ploy? Brooke pondered. That's what's written here, she said, astounded after reading the note. I can't fathom it, she added. He picked you out of the crowd and tempted you. He deceived you, Frank said. Brooke read the note several times, wondering whether what he had done to her was simply for fun. Yes, Frank confirmed. Everything he told you was for fun. Brooke felt devastated. She recognized she was only the target of this week's strategy, a reward to satisfy the heroic need for married women. Last week it could have been Debbie. The following could be Sandy, but this week, it's me. Brooke admitted her error and the upsetting understanding that she had jeopardized her marriage to Frank. I feel nauseous, she said, turning and hurrying to the restroom. After throwing up several times, she cleaned her hands and face, exited the lavatory, and saw her reflection in the mirror, appearing absolutely exhausted and matching the insanity of the evening. Brooke noticed Frank waiting near the exit. She instantly approached and embraced him. Frankly, I'm deeply sorry. Please pardon my ignorance and naivety, she pleaded, sobbing. Frank looked at her and said, Brooke, Laval caught you off guard, then seduced you to the point that you believed engaging in intimacy with him would have no consequences and that I'd be unconcerned if you had a brief contact with him. But now you've learned the opposite. You now understand, so guarantee we'll never find ourselves in this situation again. As Frank approached the exit, he spotted Laval's two comrades still present. Brooke, stay here. I need to speak with Laval's acquaintances, Frank stated. Please, let it be. We don't need any more issues, Brooke told Frank. No, Brooke, I can't abandon us in this manner, Frank said, exiting with those comments, leaving Brooke alone. He approached Laval's companions. Gentlemen, we seek no trouble, one of his comrades stated. Okay, then follow my instructions. Tell your friend Laval that he was defeated today, that he's a failure. Inform him that Frank Walker's broadcast will go global, that Mark Laval is a failure, Frank commanded. Both of Laval's comrades looked at Frank, perplexed. Sir, we're unable to express this to him. He'd annihilate both of us, one said. Do you prefer confronting me or him? Frank inquired. Sir, we don't intend to argue with you, one responded. A wise decision. Now, one of you will use the phone to deliver my message. Do it now, and mention that he shouldn't be anywhere after my leave. Frank told one of the men to pick up the phone, dial Laval's number, and convey Frank's message. Frank didn't hear the conversation, but he could tell Laval was furious since his friend had warned him not to take any reckless moves. The talk then ceased. How did he respond? Frank inquired. He said he'd end you, one of the men said. Okay, Frank acknowledged. Frank, I promise you that after everything, I'll never let another man approach me, Brooke declared. Frank looked at her carefully before responding. Okay, and when we socialize as we did tonight, I'll make every effort to help you keep that promise. I should have intervened before Laval entangled you, but I failed. Thus, the responsibility lies with both of us, as well as Laval, who shouldn't have followed and enthralled a married woman. So, Brooke, I absolve you and myself, but not Laval, and I'll confront him later. Frank, I appreciate your empathy, but please disregard Mark. We'll never cross paths with him again, and he isn't worth the possible trouble, she said. After her comment, Frank wondered why she didn't want Mark to face any repercussions. After all, Laval nearly ended Brooke's marriage. Why wouldn't she want him to feel bad for trapping her in his scheme? I'll think about it, he reassured her. Frank then inquired, do you want to return to the festivities? No, Frank, let's go home, Brooke exclaimed. Absolutely yes, let's just go home, Brooke added. Frank and Brooke proceeded back through the corridor, re-entered the restaurant, and with that, Frank's two companions picked up Brooke, and they departed the establishment and the bar. On the street, Frank handed the parking stub to the valet, and they, along with several other duos, awaited their automobile. During their wait, an SUV accelerated toward them, halting abruptly in front of them. The passenger window descended. Mark Laval was inside the SUV. Come on, Brooke. You mentioned your desire to accompany me, so come on. Enter the vehicle, Mark yelled. She won't accompany you, Frank retorted vocally. I'm not conversing with you, elderly man, Mark yelled back at Frank. Come on, Brooke, let's depart now, Mark persisted. No, Mark, I can't accompany you this evening, Brooke replied. Brooke, come here and enter the car. Let's depart now, Mark yelled. She won't accompany you. You were defeated in the game. You're a loser. Now leave this place, loser, and let us be, Frank informed Mark. Being labeled a loser in the presence of a crowd, who were probably his supporters, immediately angered Mark. I'll prove who the real loser is, Mark yelled, exiting his SUV. Frank advised the crowd awaiting their vehicles to distance themselves as the situation might escalate. He then proceeded to the SUV's driver's side front, where he encountered Laval wielding a sizable semi-automatic pistol. Consumed by fury from losing Brooke and facing public disgrace, Laval's ire was uncontrollable. Frank analyzed Laval, and his actions brought back memories of a spectacle in the Masai Mara, Kenya, where he observed a battle between a lion and hyenas over the lion's catch. Similarly, Laval had pursued Brooke for hours and then claimed her, intending to take her home for his gratification. However, before he could enact his plan, Frank intervened and rescued her. Now, like that lion, Laval was fixated on reclaiming her, indifferent to the measures required to accomplish his goal, even if it meant eliminating Frank. Brooke will join me, and if you attempt to halt it, I'll eliminate you, Laval declared. Frank retreated slightly, now standing roughly 3 meters from Mark, with his hands uplifted, palms forward, fingers stretched in a defensive yet non-threatening stance.
Lower the firearm, Frank requested.
You've disrupted my pursuit, and I'll end you. Put down the weapon before it escalates, Frank suggested in a composed, assertive tone. I'll show who's in trouble. I'll end you and then pursue your spouse, Mark threatened, aiming the pistol at Frank. So absorbed in his tirade and anger, Laval failed to notice Frank's subtle movement of his right hand into his trouser pocket, where he carried a Sig Sauer micro-compact semi-automatic pistol loaded with 8 rounds of Hornady critical defense ammunition, 1 in the chamber and 7 in the magazine. Frank, with a license for the Sig pistol, was well practiced in its defensive use. Though he hadn't engaged in actual combat for years, his military experience involving direct engagements prepared him for this perilous confrontation with an armed and hostile Mark Laval. The resurgence of those memories instilled in him the necessary reaction for this life-threatening predicament. Therefore, with his hand in his pocket, Frank resolved to conclude this encounter by deciding to fire at Laval. The immediate danger posed by Laval as an armed threat and his proximity justified Frank's lethal response. Having decided, Frank calmed Laval's outburst and agitation. He quieted, regulated his breathing, and concentrated on his action plan. Effortlessly, he drew the pistol, positioned it to shoot, aimed at Laval, and was about to discharge 2 precise rounds. The pistol's manipulation needed to be accurate, and the action completed within seconds to prevent Laval's potential return fire, a scenario Frank wished to avoid. As Frank focused on Laval and drew his weapon smoothly, suddenly, 3 fast shots were heard from behind him to his right. At the same moment, Frank noticed Laval's frame shudder as the bullet struck him, and then he observed Laval topple to the ground. Having recoiled from the unexpected gunfire, Frank yelled, "What the hell?" Turning, he noticed the assailant still pointing the handgun at Mark's prone figure. Frank swiftly regained his composure and confronted the assailant. "I believe you've done it. You can lower your weapon," Frank stated. "He was going to eliminate you," the assailant replied, lowering the firearm. "Yes, that's what he mentioned," Frank responded, then inquired, "Who are you?" "I'm an off-duty officer, and I'm in charge of security here," the assailant explained as they hastened toward Laval. "Excellent. I'm relieved you're here," Frank expressed. "Yes, I'm thankful I'm here too," she responded. Frank and the security guard crouched beside Laval, who was alive and alert but moaning in agony from 3 bullet injuries. "What occurred?" Mark groaned. "You were fired upon. Remain calm," Frank instructed. "Was I shot?" Mark inquired. "Indeed you were shot," Frank confirmed. "Who fired at me?" Mark questioned. "I fired at you, Mark," the officer confessed. Mark stared at the officer. "Marjorie?" he uttered. "Yes, Mark," she replied. "My gosh, Marjorie, why? Why did you fire at me?" Laval questioned, breathless. "Because you were about to murder this gentleman," Marjorie explained. Mark was panting heavily and bleeding profusely. "God, it hurts so much. Please aid me. I've summoned the ambulance. They're en route." "Stay put and hang on," Marjorie instructed Laval. I was gasping for breath. I didn't intend to murder him. "It was merely a jest," Mark stated, struggling for breath. "Pointing a firearm and menacing someone is no jest," Marjorie retorted. "Marjorie, you're aware it was a jest," he said in a faint voice. "Mark, how often must I tell you that your jests might result in your demise?" she replied. "I understand, but it was only a jest. I was merely jesting," he wheezed. "God, I'm so chilly. Why am I so cold?" Then he looked at Frank and pleaded, "Please, sir, I'm extremely parched. Could you fetch me some water?" Frank turned and called to the bystanders to procure water for Laval. Laval was losing blood rapidly, and Frank realized that even if the paramedics arrived immediately, nothing could be done to save him because he had bled out excessively. For a brief period, Laval continued to plead for assistance but then grew silent, weakened from blood loss. After a few more moments, his breathing ceased. Frank checked for a heartbeat, checked again, but found none. He had departed. Mark Laval had passed away. It was past 11:30 p.m. when the authorities permitted Frank and Brooke to exit the restaurant and bar. They, along with other eyewitnesses of the altercation and shooting, were interviewed by law enforcement detectives, special agents, internal affairs, and even an assistant prosecutor. Frank and Brooke recounted their interactions and involvement in Mark Laval's affairs. Frank issued a separate endorsement of the off-duty officer's action to shoot Laval, publicly stating she preserved his life. But after a night that began with attending a birthday celebration and concluded with their entanglement in the homicide of a local sports celebrity, Frank and Brooke were heading home. They traveled in silence for a stretch, neither uttering a single word until Brooke disrupted the quiet. "Frank," she began. "Yes," he replied. "Are you regretful that you didn't end him?" she asked. Without hesitating, Frank admitted, "Yes." Brooke pondered his instantaneous and unequivocal response and detected the resentment in his tone. Frank was deprived of contentment and was irate that the scenario with Laval had concluded with a female security officer committing the act when Mark confronted them outside the restaurant. Brooke was certain this now constituted Frank Walker's challenge, and she anticipated that it wouldn't bode well for Mark Laval. Mark was a youthful luminary with an enormous ego, a volatile temperament, and a weapon, in contrast to Frank Walker, an experienced corporate tactician accustomed to undermining influential figures. Frank was infuriated that this adult, indulging in childish antics, dared to attempt to usurp his wife directly before him, and Laval couldn't evade the repercussions. Brooke was fully aware that Frank was carrying a weapon and understood he had intentionally enticed Mark into a scenario where he would likely end his life. Informing Mark that he had been defeated in their game and labeling him a failure served purely as a lure, and inevitably, Mark took the bait, which doomed him. Thus, Brooke was certain Mark Laval was doomed before he even exited his SUV. Observing the clash between the man she might have loved and her spouse, she was deeply troubled because she believed herself to be the cause of Mark's demise. Had he not chosen her, and had she not consented to accompany him, he would be alive. Yet by some odd twist of fate, an off-duty police officer fatally shot Laval, mistakenly believing she was protecting Frank's life. This action inadvertently prevented Frank from having Laval confront the consequences of attempting to elope with his wife. Yet it also spared Brooke the anguish of knowing her husband was the killer. "Well, I'm relieved you didn't kill him," she confessed to him. "Why?" Frank inquired. "Because it's preferable that the officer did," she explained. "Do you mean by the police?" Frank pressed. "Yes, and by the news outlets," she added. "If I had done it, both the police and the press would have sought to sensationalize it. However, it would have been a straightforward case of self-defense. He acted aggressively, brandished a firearm, and threatened my life multiple times, standing merely 3 meters away. Hence, it would have been a defensible act of self-protection to use lethal force, regardless of the police and press opinions," he articulated. "Yes, but the press would probe and scrutinize why you chose to kill rather than injure him," she responded. "Indeed, it's their role to inquire, speculate, and offer critiques. Yet the reality remains that he was equipped with a lethal weapon, posing a fatal threat. Even if injured, for my safety, self-defense would leave me no alternative but to aim a decisive strike, Frank pondered. Brooke considered his words. It'll still be distressing in the media, even if I hadn't been the one to kill him. Some fault will be assigned to me, Frank shared. And they'll blame me, she acknowledged. Correct, they will. So brace yourself for the scrutiny we'll face. Our attorney will provide assistance to a degree, but only so much. Rest assured, the media will spin the narrative to suggest his death was directly tied to you and me. We might face legal actions and disputes, but don't fret. We're equipped to manage them and will prevail. After all, he lured you, assaulted us, and threatened me, making us the victims, Frank elucidated. He then reminded her, but bear in mind, he was a celebrated football player and a local hero here in our cherished South. Such figures are revered, so in the eyes of the media he can do no wrong. Understand that for a while, all we'll encounter in the press is the tragic tale of poor Mark Laval, portrayed as a victim of a jealous spouse, leading to his death by a security officer. However, eventually the true narrative of Mark Laval will emerge, and the media's frenzy will subside, losing interest in the saga of a sports icon known for seducing married women for nocturnal escapades. That's my wish, for all of this to simply vanish, she declared. In time it will, Frank assured her. They continued their drive in silence for a few moments, until Frank broached a provocative question about her potential regrets over missing a night of passionate intimacy with him. Brooke, taken aback and offended by Frank's inquiry, shot him a glance, incredulous at his audacity. After a brief pause, contemplating how to respond, she expressed firmly, "No, dear, absolutely not." This was the deception Frank expected to hear. A simple no would have sufficed and seemed genuine. However, the extended silence and the look in her eyes, combined with "of course not," were overly solemn and confirmed his suspicions. He realized she was reflecting on the loss of her fantastical experience and aimed to shield her disappointment from him. However, her gaze, tone, and word choice betrayed her. Yet Frank wasn't taken aback, for he understood that the interaction had rekindled and shattered the notion that she was merely a spouse, that she was a person with the freedom to seek pleasure with someone other than her husband. While they danced, Laval engaged Brooke in discussions about desires that are often left unspoken, even between spouses. Brooke listened, and his words ignited her curiosity. Laval persuaded her that the ideal way to explore these taboo desires was with a companion with whom she could be completely open, candid, and unrestrained, a partner devoid of emotional bonds, someone experienced in decadence, guiding her in discovering the sensual aspects of her nature. Thus, the groundwork for betrayal was laid, and Frank was aware of it. He recognized she was now receptive to intimacy with other men, despite her earlier vow to refrain from such encounters. This was merely a tactic to escape her current predicament. When Frank prevented her from departing with Laval, he noticed the change in her tone and saw it in her behavior. Her actions expressed a willingness to seek closeness with another, though she wasn't ready to act on these impulses just yet. But that was only for the time being. Aware of all these details, Frank acknowledged he could never trust her again. As they drove home, he pondered whether he could tolerate his distrust toward her and accept the likelihood that she might someday seize the chance to be with another man. Brooke would probably embrace this chance. Thank you for spending the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this essay, please like it and subscribe if you haven't done so already. If you have a story to share about your or another person's situation, please don't hesitate to contact me. Take care.